It's just before 6 a.m. July 8, 2022. The streets of Oxford, Mississippi are still cloaked in dawn's heavy quiet. And from a student apartment near campus, a young man steps into the pale morning light. He wears a silver robe, a gold cap, and soft gray slippers. Odd for someone heading out this early. Stranger still, he leaves his dog behind. Lexus, a white Pomeranian he rarely went anywhere without. That man was Jimmie Jay Lee. 20 years old. Smart. Magnetic. Loud when he needed to be, and unapologetically himself. He was a social work grad student at the University of Mississippi. The kind of person who called his mother every single day, especially on her birthday. But on that day, her birthday, Jay didn't call. For Stephanie Lee, the silence felt unnatural. Disturbing. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. Lexus, left alone, barked endlessly behind Jay's apartment door. Something was wrong. Everyone knew it. Jay Lee was known in Oxford. Not just for his style or spirit, but for his presence. He showed up in rooms with purpose. As an openly gay black man in a conservative southern town, that took courage. And sometimes courage makes you a target. When police pulled surveillance footage, they saw Jay walking out of his apartment. Then returning, then leaving again, finally, at 5:58 a.m. That was the last confirmed sighting. No one saw him alive after that. No signs of forced entry. No screams. No alarms. Just a ghost trail of digital clues. And then, nothing. Until, 2 days later. Jay's car turns up in a parking lot. Towed from a student housing complex he didn't live in. Parked hurriedly, carelessly. Inside the car? His wallet. His keys. But no phone. And no Jay. At that moment, this case stops being a missing persons report. It becomes a countdown. To something darker. Because what investigators would soon find, hidden deep inside Jay's phone records, was a string of messages. From someone who didn't want to be found. Someone with something to hide. A secret that would fracture a community. A name no one expected. This wasn't random. This was intentional. This was personal. And this was just the beginning. Because Jay Lee didn't vanish. Jay Lee walked into the home of someone he trusted. And never walked out. And now, we begin to follow his steps. We rewind the clock. One day earlier, July 7, 2022. It's still dark when Jay sends a birthday message to his mom. A simple gesture, but one filled with tradition. Every year since he left home, Jay called to sing. Not text. Not a voice note. He sang. Loud. Off-key. And always right on time. But this year he breaks that rhythm. No call. Just a text. At 2:09 a.m. Stephanie Lee wakes up hours later, sees the message and replies. She expects the usual call to follow. It never comes. At first, it feels like a missed moment. A delay. But hours stretch into the afternoon. Calls go unanswered. No replies. That's not Jay. He doesn't disappear. Not from his mother. Back in Oxford, the silence grows louder. Jay's friends try to reach him too. No response. Then comes the first real sign that something's wrong. Lexus. From behind Jay's apartment door, the little white dog barks, non-stop. Lexus is loyal. Protective. And never alone for long. By that evening, concern turns to urgency. Jay's friends contact campus police. A welfare check is requested. Feels surreal, like a bad dream. But when the door goes unanswered, reality crashes in. Jay Lee is missing. Surveillance footage is pulled from the campus walk apartments. The images show Jay returning to his apartment at 4:40 a.m. Then leaving again, less than 90 minutes later, at 5:58. He wears the same robe, cap, and slippers. Not dressed for a trip. Not even dressed for errands. It's as if he stepped out expecting to be back in minutes. But he never returns. The footage raises more questions than answers. Why did he come back after 4 a.m.? Who did he meet before that? And what made him go back out again so soon? AT&T logs later confirmed that Jay's phone remained active after he left. It pinged near Stone Park. Then a dorm known as Residential College South. Then silence. No phone activity. No card transactions. No trace of Jay. His digital life, so full of messages, posts, and constant connection, goes quiet. Not gradually. Instantly. It was as if he'd been cut off. Removed. Silenced. And now the clock isn't just ticking, it's accelerating. Because Jay's last messages didn't just stop. They vanished into the hands of someone who didn't want them seen. And that's where the search begins. Not in the woods. Not in his apartment. But inside the messages Jay sent. Right before the silence. In the absence of a body, detectives turned to the next best source of evidence, Jay's digital life. Through Jay's iCloud backup, they begin to recover pieces of the story. Messages, locations, usernames. Each breadcrumb leads them deeper into the web of his final hours. And then they find it. A Snapchat conversation unfolding in real time just before Jay vanished. The username is cryptic, red EY24. But the tone? Unmistakably tense. Jay's messages reveal a back and forth laced with frustration and hesitation. He's clearly arguing with someone he's been intimate with. Someone he trusted, until that trust fractured. "You just trying to lure me over there to beat my ass or something?" Jay writes at 5:30 a.m. There's a war happening in these messages. Desire, tension, suspicion, even bitterness. Something had gone very wrong between them. And yet, Jay still considers going back. The man responds, trying to soothe Jay's fears. "You are tripping. I do feel bad. I ain't trying to end like this." But there's a shadow in his words. A calm performance. The kind of reply you give not to make peace, but to keep control. Jay sets a condition. A physical act of affection as proof of sincerity. The man agrees. At 5:58 a.m., Jay leaves his apartment. Minutes later, his phone sends a final message. Open. Detectives trace the red EY24 account to an email. That email leads them to a podcast. And that podcast belongs to 22-year-old Timothy Harrington Jr., a name with weight in Oxford. Tim is everything Jay wasn't. Reserved, respected, quiet. From a well-known family that owns property across the county. His grandfather? A pastor of over 40 years. His reputation? Impeccable. But his online life tells a different story. The red EY account wasn't Tim's only way of contacting Jay. Earlier messages reveal a pattern. 2 identities. 2 voices. 1 man. A double life built on secrecy and shame. Investigators piece it together. Jay had been involved with Tim for weeks, maybe months. Their relationship was messy, intimate, and unbalanced. Jay lived out loud. Tim lived in shadows. And in those shadows something broke. Because this wasn't just a closeted affair. It was a ticking clock. A threat to a life built on appearances. One man had something to hide. And another? Had nothing to lose. The man with 2 names had just become the prime suspect. To understand what happened that morning, we have to look deeper. Past the messages, past the footage, into the lives of the 2 men at the center of it all. Jay Lee was more than a name and a headline. He was energy in motion. A campus staple. Loved by classmates, admired by professors, and known across the University of Mississippi for his boldness, his kindness, and his unmistakable style. He wore color like armor. He moved through the world with openness, and with purpose. Jay didn't just study social work. He embodied it. His mission was to help people, to heal communities, to leave the world a little better than he found it. He also lived his truth out loud. As an openly gay black man in the Deep South, that was a radical act. It was also, in his case, a joyous one. Jay was confident in who he was. His presence was magnetic. He made people feel seen. And in doing so, he stood out. Then there was Timothy Harrington Jr. From the outside, Tim's life looked picture perfect. Raised in a respected family, grandson of a beloved pastor, graduate of the same university as Jay. He co-ran a moving company, helped manage his family's rental properties, and stayed largely under the radar. But behind that quiet exterior was a truth he fought to suppress. A truth that collided violently with Jay's openness. The relationship between Jay and Tim wasn't just sexual, it was psychological. Jay represented freedom. And Tim? He represented fear. Every moment of their connection, every text, every secret visit, exposed that tension. To be with Jay meant confronting a part of himself Tim had buried. And as the relationship deepened, that buried part started to surface. Jay saw Tim, not the version he presented to the world, but the truth he tried to hide. And that terrified him. Because for someone whose life depended on appearances, exposure wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Jay had the power to make Tim visible in a way he wasn't ready for. In a way he couldn't control. Investigators would later theorize that this wasn't about love or even lust. It was about power. About shame. About identity. Jay Lee didn't threaten Tim's life. He threatened the version of it Tim was willing to kill to protect. And beneath that surface, everything began to crack. In the hours before Jay Lee disappeared, his phone told a story he never got the chance to finish. Investigators, now locked in a race against time, secure access to Jay's iCloud. It's a vault of private moments, texts, notes, location pings. But what they find most crucial are his Snapchat backups, fleeting messages that were never meant to be permanent. At first, they uncover a conversation filled with warmth and playful banter. It's flirtatious, familiar. Two people who know each other well. But something shifts. That same user disappears, and is replaced by another, Red EY24. The tone turns sharp, defensive, on edge. This wasn't just one account, it was two personas, both belonging to Tim Harrington. The messages reveal that the two had been together earlier that night. But something went wrong. There was a fight. Jay had blocked Tim from all platforms, Snapchat, Twitter, everything. He'd cut him off cold. But Tim wasn't finished. Using his secondary account, Tim re-entered Jay's digital life under a different name. The messages he sends are pleading, calculated, manipulative. "Come back," he writes. Jay hesitates. "Why not? You fool, like you done did some questionable stuff." "I feel bad," Tim replies. "We cool. I ain't trying to end like this." He dangles something intimate, something personal, as bait. "I'll do that thing you always wanted," he promises. It's a strange offer. Ambiguous. But the meaning was clear between them. Something specific. Something Jay had asked for before and hadn't received. It works. Jay responds reluctantly. "Okay, I'm coming." His last message, sent at 6:03 a.m. reads, "Open." A single word, likely signaling his arrival at Tim's apartment. And then, nothing. No response. No follow-up. No more data. For investigators, the timeline is now airtight. Jay was lured, through manipulation, flattery, and promise, into returning to the apartment of someone he'd already blocked out of his life. Someone he didn't fully trust. That last word, open, became more than a message. It became a door. To a secret. To a lie. To a crime that, from that moment on, stopped being digital. Because after that word was sent, Jay Lee disappeared from the world. And the man he went to see never reported him missing. After Jay's last message, the trail of his physical presence goes cold. But the movements of the man he went to see, Tim Harrington Jr., begin to heat up. It's still July 8th, only hours after Jay vanished. At 9:12 a.m., surveillance footage shows Tim at a local Walmart. He's calm, casual, unhurried. He browses through the aisles until he finds what he's looking for, a roll of duct tape. He pays in cash, then walks out alone. There's no moving job scheduled for that day. No recorded appointment. But shortly after leaving Walmart, Tim is captured again, this time switching vehicles. He abandons his personal car and picks up a box truck used for his moving business. On its own, it might seem routine. But that day there's no client, no delivery, just him, driving. Then come the changes. Shoes swapped, clothing altered. Surveillance picks him up again, this time at his parents' home in Grenada County, nearly 90 miles from Oxford. He walks out of the house carrying a shovel, then a wheelbarrow. Tools, not for work, but for something else. Where he went next, no camera followed. But phone data tells part of the story. It traces Tim through back roads and rural routes, quiet areas rarely traveled, places no one would be watching. By evening, he's back at his parents' home unloading the tools. Still alone, still silent. Number 911 call. No welfare check. No search. Instead, Tim picks up his phone, and he starts to search, not for Jay's location, but for Jay's Twitter account. He checks it again, and again. In the hours and days following Jay's disappearance, he scours Jay's digital profiles, watching, reading, monitoring what the public can see. Even before Jay's car is discovered, before police know he's missing, Tim is already looking for signs that others might be catching on. It's not panic, it's calculation. Because if Jay had truly just left, why would Tim be checking his social media like that? He's not waiting for Jay to return. He's checking to see if anyone knows he's gone. A shovel, a truck, duct tape, a search history filled with quiet paranoia. Behind Tim Harrington's practiced smile, something darker is beginning to take shape. And it's looking more like a cover-up than a disappearance. When investigators finally sit across from Timothy Harrington Jr., they don't open with accusations. They ask simple questions. Where were you? Did you know Jay Lee? At first, Tim denies even knowing him. Says Jay was just someone he'd seen around. A face on campus. But when detectives reveal the digital trail, the messages, the Snapchat usernames, the pings to his apartment, Tim's story begins to shift. He admits they were acquaintances. Then that they'd spoken a few times. Finally, that they'd had a casual relationship. The version of events unravels further. First, Tim claims he never saw Jay that day. Then that Jay showed up unexpectedly. Then that they talked, briefly, and Jay left on foot. Alone. Each detail seems to shift under pressure. But one fact remains, Jay was never seen again. With no body, no blood, and no confirmed crime scene, it would be easy to call this case circumstantial. But it's more than that. It's a pattern of silence, omission, and digital deception. Then comes the chilling detail no one expected. Tim's phone reveals a search from the morning of July 8th. A question typed into Google. How long does it take to strangle someone? The words are simple, specific, and horrifying. Not theoretical, not academic. It's not a question you ask out of curiosity. It's a question you ask when you need an answer. And yet, without a body, there's still no official cause of death. No trace evidence. No confession. Just a timeline, airtight and damning. Jay leaves his apartment and arrives at Tim's place. He sends the word, open. Then, nothing. Hours later, Tim is buying duct tape, retrieving tools, scouring Jay's social media. But publicly? He says nothing. The DA has a decision to make. Pursue a case built on digital evidence, surveillance footage, and a mountain of circumstantial weight, or let it fade into the shadows. They go forward. Tim Harrington is charged with murder. Some say it's too soon. That without a body the case will fall apart. Others say it's already too late. But the prosecution believes one thing with certainty. Jay Lee didn't just vanish. He was silenced. And the only man who knows why has already started rewriting the story. When the trial begins, the courtroom is packed. Some come seeking justice. Others come to defend legacy. All come with questions. Timothy Harrington Jr. sits quietly beside his high-powered defense team. No handcuffs. No emotion. He doesn't look like a killer. That's the point. Across the aisle sits Stephanie Lee, Jay's mother. Her hands clasped in prayer. Her eyes fixed on the man accused of silencing her son. The prosecution builds a case from fragments. Digital trails, surveillance footage, location data, Google searches. It's a case without a body, but it's airtight in tone. Every movement Tim made after Jay vanished seems calculated. Every silence, deliberate. But then comes the defense. And their strategy is clear. Put Jay on trial. They call him impulsive, reckless. Suggest he led a secret life. That he sought out men like Tim to manipulate them. To threaten their silence. To use their shame as leverage. They twist Jay's confidence into predation. His openness into recklessness. His life, his truth, into a weapon. Stephanie doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. Her face says it all. Her son is gone. And now, his character is being buried alongside his body. Still, the evidence is compelling. The jury listens closely. They watch the footage. They hear the timeline. They see the searches, the tools, the changes in Tim's story. After 5 days, the room goes silent. Deliberations begin. 5 hours pass. Then a note is handed to the judge. We cannot agree. Inside the jury room, it's 11-1. 11 believe Tim is guilty. 1 holds out. Maybe it's the lack of physical evidence. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's fear. But it's enough. The judge declares a mistrial. And just like that, justice slips through the cracks. Stephanie holds back tears as reporters rush the hallway. Tim walks out of court free on bond. No ankle monitor. No statement. Just silence. For the Lee family, it's not just a legal loss. It's an emotional collapse. Because they told the truth. They showed the path. They proved Jay didn't just disappear. He was lured, silenced, erased. And it still wasn't enough. In the eyes of the law, Jay Lee remains missing. But in the eyes of the people, he's already been failed. It's February 3, 2025. In the early morning chill, a group of deer hunters cuts through the underbrush of rural Carroll County, Mississippi, about 90 minutes from Oxford. Their boots crunch against frost-covered leaves, their breath visible in the cold. They're not looking for anything unusual, but what they find changes everything. Half buried in a shallow, illegal dumping site, they see it, bones. Human. Weather-worn. Fragile. The hunters call it in. Deputies arrive. Then state investigators. Forensics begins immediately. The remains are transported to the state crime lab. Within 48 hours, the confirmation comes. Jay Lee has been found. At last, after 19 months of uncertainty, of silence, of legal gridlock, there is no doubt. The boy who walked out of his apartment in a silver robe and slippers is no longer missing. He is gone. And now, everything changes. With a body comes weight the law can no longer ignore. No more speculation. No more mistrials. Timothy Harrington Jr. is arrested again, this time under the heavy hand of capital murder charges. The state considers the death penalty. There's no soft defense team now. Tim is assigned a public defender. The image of prestige, the legacy of a respected family, all of it begins to crumble under the shadow of what's been uncovered. No one reveals how Jay's body was found, what condition it was in, what evidence it might carry. Those details are withheld, protected. But the implications are deafening. For the Lee family, it's a heartbreak that hurts differently. Not the pain of the unknown, but the pain of knowing. Stephanie Lee attends the press conference. Her voice breaks, but her resolve does not. "This doesn't bring my baby back," she says. "But it brings us a step closer to truth, to justice." The community that once whispered now speaks louder. Rallies are held. Vigils relit. The name Jay Lee begins to trend again, this time with hope. The courtroom lights flicker back on. The legal system wakes up. Because now there's a body. Now there's a grave. And now there's no more hiding. Timothy Harrington Jr. will face trial again. But this time he won't just be answering for Jay's disappearance. He'll be answering for his death. Jay Lee lived with a kind of bravery most people only pretend to understand. In a place where difference could still be dangerous, he chose to be seen. Loudly. Proudly. Unapologetically. But in a world that still punishes authenticity, that choice came at a cost. His story began as a missing persons report. A face on a flyer. A name whispered in worry. But it became something much more. An indictment of shame, silence, and the devastating consequences of secrets too heavy to hold. This isn't just about Jay. It's about everyone who's ever been told to dim their light, to hide who they are to protect someone else's comfort. It's about what happens when fear of being exposed becomes more powerful than love, than empathy, than life itself. Timothy Harrington Jr. may soon face the full weight of justice. But even if the courts deliver a sentence, Jay's story was never about one man's guilt. It was about a community that had to wake up. A family that refused to be silent. And a truth that could no longer be buried. Jay's friends gather every year now. They hold candles. They wear gold. They speak his name in classrooms, in rallies, in moments of quiet protest. His mother, Stephanie, still speaks with the strength of a woman who has lost everything, but refuses to lose her son's voice. Because justice isn't only about prison bars. It's about memory, legacy, impact. And that's why you're here. You didn't just stumble upon a story. You chose to witness it. You chose to remember Jay Lee. And as long as you remember him, his smile, his spark, his truth, then part of him lives on. Do you want to watch more stories like this? Stories that matter, stories that linger? Please like, comment, share, and follow for more. Because some stories refuse to stay silent. And some truths will always rise.